April 6, 1945. Reims, France. SHAEF Forward Headquarters. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery is going over intelligence summaries during his morning tea. The routine is orderly, exact, unmistakably British. His aide, a young captain named Willoughby, steps into the room holding a dispatch folder stamped urgent. Montgomery glances up, clearly irritated by the interruption. Willoughby hands him the top page. It's from the 12th Army Group, 3rd Army Sector. Montgomery reads it once. His face remains composed. He reads it again. Then, slowly, he lowers his teacup. The porcelain taps softly against the saucer. This says Patton has liberated 4,000 prisoners. Montgomery says, in 24 hours. Willoughby nods. Yes, sir, 4,000. And this report is 2 days old, Montgomery adds. Yes, sir. The current total is over 7,000. Montgomery stares at the paper. 7,000 Allied prisoners freed in 3 days by George Patton. If you want to see how one general's refusal to follow orders saved 32,000 lives and pushed the Allied High Command to the brink, hit that subscribe button and join the WW2 elite community. We bring you the untold stories the textbooks leave out. Stories that don't just explain what happened, but why it mattered. Now let's look at what really happened when Patton decided the rules no longer applied. Montgomery rises and walks over to the large situation map fixed to the wall. His chief of staff, Brigadier General Charles Richardson, enters carrying additional dispatches. One look at his face makes it clear this news won't improve the situation. Show me, Montgomery says. Richardson steps to the map and begins marking locations with a greased pencil. Ohrdruf, Langensalza, Salza, Mohausen. Each mark represents a liberated camp. They form a tight cluster, all within 3rd Army zone. All freed in less than a week. 3rd Army has advanced 63 miles in 6 days, Richardson explains, from Avera River to well beyond. Montgomery traces a line with his finger. 63 miles. Then he looks north toward his own positions, Bremen, Hamburg. His 21st Army Group has advanced 18 miles in the same period. How many prisoners have we liberated? Montgomery asks. Approximately 2,800, sir, as of this morning. Montgomery does the arithmetic silently. Patton's 3rd Army, 7,000 prisoners in 3 days. His own forces, 2,800 in 6 days with comparable manpower. And his formations are actually closer to the major prisoner camps near the Elbe. The numbers are undeniable and humiliating. This can't be correct, Montgomery says. He was ordered to consolidate along the Werra. How is he 60 miles past the stop line? It's confirmed, sir, Richardson replies. Chief Intelligence has verified it. Multiple camps. 3rd Army is moving so fast they're overrunning prisoner columns on force marches. The Germans are evacuating camps ahead of the Soviet advance. Patton's units are intercepting them on the roads. Montgomery studies the map again. The liberation sites form a diagonal slash across Thuringia. It isn't methodical. It isn't orderly. It looks like chaos on paper, but it's chaos that works. That's impossible, Montgomery says quietly. You can't advance, fight, and run humanitarian operations at this pace. The logistics alone, fuel, maintenance, supply lines. Richardson meets his commander's eyes. Apparently, sir, you can... The room goes silent. Outside, staff officers move through the corridors. Typewriters hammer away. Phones ring. The machinery of command grinds on. But inside this office, Bernard Montgomery is facing an uncomfortable reality. George Patton is doing the impossible again. What's his casualty rate? Montgomery asks. Richardson checks his notes. Lower than projected, sir. 3rd Army is encountering scattered resistance. Most German units are withdrawing or surrendering. The Wehrmacht is collapsing, and he's maintaining offensive momentum while conducting these liberations. Yes, sir. 9th Corps is engaging near Erfurt. 12th Corps has reached Gotha. 8th Corps is advancing on Leipzig. At the same time, each corps is detaching units to secure camps as they're discovered. Montgomery turns back to the map. The scale of what Patton is doing is staggering. He isn't choosing between military objectives and humanitarian action. He's doing both simultaneously at full speed. And Montgomery hasn't yet seen the latest dispatch, the one describing Patton's demand to keep pushing all the way to Czechoslovakia. According to Omar Bradley's memoir, A General's Life, this moment marked the beginning of what he later called the final Patton crisis. The war in Europe was nearing its end. Victory was inevitable. The strategic goals were straightforward: link up with Soviet forces, secure Germany, end the war. Simple, except George Patton never did simple. Let's rewind 7 days. April 3rd, 1945. Third Army is positioned along the Vera River. The official directive from Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force is explicit: consolidate positions. Prepare for junction with Soviet forces advancing from the east. Coordinate movements. Avoid diplomatic incidents. The war is essentially won. Don't ruin it now. Patton reads a directive in a command post while his staff watches closely. They recognize the expression on his face. It's the look that means he's about to ignore it. Gentlemen, Patton says, we're going east. Maximum speed. Every camp we find, we liberate. Every prisoner column we encounter, we free. Every German unit that gets in our way, we destroy. Any questions? His chief of staff, Major General Hobart Gay, answers carefully. Sir, the directive says consolidate. The directive doesn't say stop. Patton fires back. It says prepare for junction with the Soviets. We'll be prepared. We'll prepare while moving. Anything else? No one speaks. Good. Issue the orders. 12th Corps advances on Eisenach. 20th Corps takes Gotha. 8th Corps moves toward Leipzig. Recon pushes as far forward as possible. I want to know where every camp is, every forced march route, every concentration of prisoners. We find them. We free them. That's all. Within 72 hours, 3rd Army units liberate Ordorf concentration camp, the first camp freed by American forces. What they discover there shocks even hardened combat veterans. Eisenhower, Bradley, and Patton tour the site together. On April 12th, Eisenhower orders every nearby unit to visit the camp. He wants the soldiers to see what they're fighting against and what they're fighting to end. But by then, Patton's forces have already moved on. The tempo doesn't slow. It accelerates. At 21st Army Group headquarters in northern Germany, Montgomery watches all of this unfold with increasing unease. His own operations continue in a careful, methodical manner. Bremen is under attack. Hamburg is being encircled, and camps are being uncovered and liberated wherever ground is secured. But everything pales beside the numbers coming out of 3rd Army, numbers that are becoming impossible to ignore. On April 5th, 3rd Army reports 3,200 prisoners of war liberated. April 6th, the total rises to 5,800. April 7th, 7,400. Montgomery's operations officer delivers the daily intelligence brief. Sir, 3rd Army is now reporting contact with Soviet forward elements near Erfurt. Montgomery looks up sharply. That's impossible. They can't have reached the Soviet advance already. Apparently they have, sir. Reconnaissance elements only, not main body units. Montgomery turns back to map. The Soviets are pushing west. The Americans are advancing east. The agreed meeting line is the Elbe River. Patton's reconnaissance units should be nowhere near Soviet forces yet, but somehow they are. Get me General Bradley on the telephone. Montgomery says, April 8, 1945. The secure call everyone knew was coming. Montgomery sits rigidly at his desk as the operator connects him to 12th Army Group headquarters in Verdun. Omar Bradley answers. Omar, your 3rd Army is operating entirely outside the agreed boundary lines. Montgomery says, his voice control clipped, every syllable precise. Eisenhower's directive was explicit. consolidate and prepare for junction with Soviet forces. On the other end of the line, Bradley leans back in his chair. He had been expecting this, dreading it even, not because Montgomery is wrong about the facts. He isn't. Patton is well beyond his limits. But Bradley also knows what Montgomery refuses to acknowledge. George is liberating concentration camps. Monty, Bradley replies carefully. And rescuing our own men, thousands of them, Montgomery snaps back, at the cost of an organized advance. He's creating a salient, exposing his flanks. This isn't sound doctrine. It's grandstanding. The same reckless behavior we saw in Sicily, in France. He treats the chain of command as optional. Bradley's jaw tightens. He's defended Patton for 2 years, through Sicily, the slapping incident in Normandy, France, and he'll defend him now. Is it grandstanding? Bradley asks. Because while we're talking, he just liberated another camp at Langensalza. 3,000 more prisoners, British, American, French. When exactly would you like me to tell him to stop rescuing Allied soldiers? There's a long pause. When Montgomery speaks again, his voice is colder, harder. Don't be obtuse. This is about coordination. His advance disrupts the entire front. My forces are securing objectives methodically while he tears across Germany. Your forces are stalled at Bremen. Bradley cuts in. George is at Erfurt. Those aren't opinions. Monty, they're map coordinates. They're facts. My forces are facing heavy German resistance. Bremen is defended. Hamburg is defended. We're conducting proper combined arms operations. And George is destroying German resistance while freeing prisoners at the same time. Should I tell him to slow down? Should I tell him that proper procedure matters more than saving lives? The silence stretches, 10 seconds, 15. When Montgomery finally responds, his voice carries the full weight of command. I want this raised with Eisenhower. Third Army is out of control. This isn't about prisoners. This is about Patton doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and forcing everyone else to adapt. It's unprofessional. It's dangerous. And it sets a precedent that will haunt this command. Bradley's voice goes flat. I'll pass along your concerns, Field Marshal. The line goes dead. Bradley sets the receiver down and stares at nothing for a long moment. His aide, Major Chester Hansen, steps in. Everything all right, sir? Bradley exhales slowly. Monty wants Patton reined in. He's not wrong about the risks. George is creating vulnerabilities, but he's also saving more lives in a week than most armies save in a month. He picks up his pen and writes in his diary, an entry later published in his memoir. Montgomery complained bitterly about Patton's freelancing, called it unprofessional and dangerous. I was not about to tell George to slow down while he was saving lives. Some things matter more than procedure. And Montgomery isn't wrong about the dangers. Patton is creating a salient. He is exposing his flanks. He is outrunning supply lines. He is ignoring boundaries. Every military principle says this is reckless. Every freed prisoner says it is worth it. And Patton isn't slowing down. At 3rd Army headquarters, the tempo is relentless. Maps are updated hourly. Reports pour in from divisions, regiments, battalions. Each one brings news of another camp, another forced march column, another 1,000 men pulled back from death. On April 9th, Major General Hobart Gay, Patton's chief of staff, approaches him. Sir, our supply lines are stretched thin. Fuel consumption is above projections. If we keep this pace, we'll need emergency resupply within 48 hours. Patton doesn't look up from a map, then requests emergency resupply. Sir, it may be denied. We're operating beyond approved boundaries. Patton finally looks up. Hobie, in the last 6 days we freed 10,000 Allied prisoners. 10,000. Do you really think they're going to deny fuel to an army doing that? Sir, Field Marshal Montgomery has complained to General Bradley. I know, Patton says. I don't care. We keep moving. We keep liberating. Supply will catch up. It always does. Gay nods. He knows better than to argue. Yes, sir. 12th Corps reports another camp near Mulhausen. Estimated 500 prisoners. Send a combat command. Secure it. Free them. Next, 20th Corps is approaching the Czech border near Cheb. Patton's finger traces a line on the map. The Czech border. Beyond it, Prague. He knows the politics. Prague is supposed to go to the Soviets. Churchill wants it. Stalin demands it. Eisenhower has promised it. But Prague is 48 hours away, maybe less. Request permission to continue into Czechoslovakia. Patton says. Gay hesitates. Sir, that will be denied. Request it anyway. April 10th, 1945. 3rd Army forward elements reach the Czechoslovak border near Cheb, 100 miles beyond their authorized advance. 100 miles. The request to push on to Prague moves up the chain and is denied within hours. Stay on your side of the line. Let the Red Army take Prague. Political agreement. Strategic necessity. Direct order. Patton's response is recorded by his aide, Colonel Charles Codman. Patton studies a map, then looks at his staff, his face tight with frustration. I'll tell you something, Charles. We could be in Prague in 2 days. 2 days. And if someone wants to court-martial me afterward, they can. But the men still trapped in those camps don't have time to wait. Politics. They can't wait for Stalin and Churchill to decide who gets credit for liberating what. Codman says nothing. What could he possibly say? But Eisenhower made it personal, Patton continues. He called me directly, not through Omar. He called me himself. And when Eisenhower makes it personal, you don't cross that line. Patton doesn't go to Prague, not because of the order itself, but because Eisenhower personally makes it clear this isn't negotiable. This is politics, alliance politics, the future shape of Europe. But the attitude behind it, that willingness to risk a court-martial to save lives, that is pure Patton. That is who he is. At NAF headquarters in Versailles, the situation is nearing crisis. Eisenhower's chief of staff, General Walter Bedell Smith, writes in his diary on April 12th, Ike is furious, not at Patton's results. 15,000 men freed, an extraordinary figure, far beyond what anyone believed possible, but at the diplomatic fallout. Churchill is calling daily. Stalin is asking pointed questions through Zhukov. Montgomery won't stop complaining about proper procedure. The pressure is real. Soviet liaison officers are demanding explanations. Why are American forces approaching the agreed demarcation line early? Are the Americans attempting to seize territory promised to the Soviet Union? Is this a political maneuver? A violation of Yalta? Eisenhower has to personally reassure Stalin that no, this is not a betrayal of Yalta, not a land grab. Just Patton being Patton, moving fast, overrunning chaos, liberating camps, saving lives. Stalin, according to Soviet records, replies, "Your General Patton does not appear to understand the meaning of boundaries. Perhaps you should explain them to him using smaller words." Eisenhower's response isn't recorded, but it's easy to imagine the Supreme Commander of Allied forces trying to explain George Patton to Joseph Stalin, and failing. Meanwhile, at 21st Army Group headquarters, Montgomery watches the prisoner liberation figures with mounting frustration. His forces are freeing camps too, carefully, systematically, with coordination, logistics, and combined arms discipline. By April 14th, 21st Army Group has liberated 4,200 Allied prisoners. That matters. That's significant. That's 4,200 people saved. But 3rd Army's count now stands at 16,800. That's when Montgomery's Public Affairs Office issues a press release emphasizing the methodical liberation of camps in northern Germany, highlighting professionalism, coordination, and proper integration of humanitarian operations with military objectives. The release is factual, restrained, professional, everything Montgomery values. Then the American press picks it up. Stars and Stripes runs the numbers side by side. The headline reads, Patton's Third Army frees 17,000 in 10 days. The subheading: British forces liberate 4,200 in same period. It isn't meant as a competition. It's just data. But facts create narratives. Montgomery cables SHAF public affairs in anger. This is unseemly competition. This is not the British way. Stop turning liberation into a race. Focus on the mission, not headlines. The reply from SHAF is polite but firm. These are factual reports. We cannot suppress facts. The press is doing its job. The numbers are what they are. And the truth is, Patton isn't competing with Montgomery. He isn't trying to embarrass anyone. He's racing against time. Every day in a camp is another day prisoners might die, might be executed as the right collapses into chaos. Speed isn't grandstanding. Speed saves lives. But Montgomery sees something else. He sees Patton making him look slow, cautious, indifferent. And that hurts because it isn't true. Montgomery cares deeply. His forces are saving lives too. 4,200 lives. That's 4,200 families reunited. But 16,800 is more than 4,200, and mathematics doesn't care about fairness. And the real explosion hasn't even happened yet, because Patton isn't finished. Not even close. On April 15th, 1945, Third Army abruptly accelerates east again toward the Mulde River, just 25 miles from the agreed Soviet link-up line on the Elbe. At the same time, reconnaissance elements are reported near Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. SHAF demands clarity. Where is Third Army's main body? Where are division headquarters? What are the objectives? What is the operational plan? Patton's communications suddenly become unreliable. Radios are said to be affected by atmospheric interference. Telephone lines are reportedly cut by retreating German units. Updates arrive late. Position reports are vague. 12th Army Group reports 3rd Army engaged with scattered Wehrmacht units near Leipzig, exploiting opportunities as they arise. British-era reconnaissance reports American columns observed 30 miles beyond reported positions, advancing on multiple axes, appearing to deliberately exploit toward the Elbe. Soviet liaison officers report American advance elements at coordinates suggesting movement along a Prague axis and demand clarification of American intentions. SHAF demands answers. Patton's headquarters replies with a message that becomes infamous: pursuing fleeing enemy, liberating camps as encountered. Will update positions when fluid situation stabilizes. Fluid situation is Patton's way of saying he's doing what he thinks is right, and we'll explain it later. At Montgomery's headquarters, the Field Marshal reads the April 15th intelligence summary, his grip tightening on the paper, his face hardening. "He's doing it again," Montgomery says to Richardson, advancing beyond orders and asking forgiveness afterward. And this time he could start a war with the Russians. Does he understand that? Richardson chooses his words carefully. "Sir, Third Army has liberated another 2,000 prisoners in the last 24 hours. Camps near Gotha, mixed nationalities, including approximately 400 British personnel." Montgomery goes silent. 400 British soldiers going home because Patton moved fast. "I'm not questioning the value of the liberations," Montgomery says quietly. "I'm questioning the method, the disregard for orders, the precedent it sets. What happens when every field commander decides operational plans are optional?" "Optional? Yes, sir. But I can't say that publicly, can I? Because then I'm the one opposing the liberation of prisoners." Richardson says nothing. There is nothing to say. At SEF, Eisenhower is on the phone with Bradley. April 16th. Eisenhower's voice is tight with controlled anger. "Where the hell is he, Omar?" And "Don't tell me fluid situation. I need coordinates. I need objectives. I need to know what George is actually doing so I can explain it to the combined chiefs, to Churchill, to Stalin. Where's Third Army's main body?" Bradley answers carefully. "George is liberating camps and pursuing German units. He's exploiting the collapse of Wehrmacht resistance. Last report, another 2,000 prisoners freed near Gotha. Mixed nationalities, including a significant number of Soviet prisoners. Omar, I know, Eisenhower replies, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what Third Army is accomplishing. But he's also creating a political nightmare. Do you understand that? Stalin is asking questions. Churchill is asking questions. And I don't have answers because your army commander won't tell me where his forces actually are. I'll get you updated coordinates within 6 hours, Ike. Make it 3. The line goes dead. In London, Winston Churchill sits in a war cabinet meeting. The minutes record his remark. General Patton appears to operate in a reality where the chain of command is merely advisory. While I appreciate the liberation of British personnel, I must question whether this level of operational independence sets a precedent we can sustain in future combined operations. That is, diplomatic language for Patton is out of control, and someone needs to stop him. But the truth is, he isn't out of control at all. He is in complete control of his army, his tempo, his mission, his objectives. He just isn't operating under anyone else's definition of control. Montgomery seeks to control risk. Patton seeks to control outcomes. Those are fundamentally different philosophies. Then reporters uncover what Patton has said on the record. At a press briefing on April 17th, a New York Times correspondent asked Patton about criticism that his advance is too aggressive, too risky, that is creating unnecessary complications for Allied command. Patton's reply becomes front-page news across Europe. Some people think liberating camps should be done carefully, methodically by the book. I think it should be done fast, before anyone else dies in those hellholes. We can debate procedure after we've saved lives. We can debate doctrine after those men are home. But while they're still in those camps, still on forced marches, I'm not interested in debate. I'm interested in speed. The statement hits Allied headquarters like a grenade. How do you argue with that? How do you criticize a man for saving lives too quickly? Montgomery reads a quote in the Times over breakfast on April 18th. He folds a paper and sets it down. He says nothing. His aide watches him closely. "Sir, do you have a comment?" "No," Montgomery answers quietly. What could he say? That Patton should slow down? That saving lives ought to be more methodical? That procedure matters more than people? He can't say any of that, not when British soldiers are among those being freed. By April 18th, the figures are staggering. Third Army has liberated more than 32,000 Allied prisoners of war. 32,000 in 15 days. They've advanced 140 miles, crossed 6 major rivers, liberated Buchenwald on April 11th, Flossenburg on April 23rd, dozens of subcamps and labor camps, intercepted forced march columns on the roads. SHAF logistics officers run the numbers in disbelief. The fuel consumption alone should have made the operation impossible. Maintenance demands should have slowed everything to a crawl. Combat operations combined with mass humanitarian relief should have crushed the tempo. Yet Third Army somehow did it all at once. The operation isn't just unprecedented, it's theoretically impossible. Every logistics manual says this cannot be done. Every tactical doctrine says this pace cannot be sustained. Every operational guideline insists you cannot combine offensive maneuver warfare with large-scale humanitarian rescue, except Patton did. At 21st Army Group, the total now stands at roughly 12,000 prisoners liberated. That is significant. That is substantial. It is a real humanitarian achievement. Montgomery's forces secure Bremen on April 26. Hamburg surrenders on May 3rd. Major objectives accomplished. Resistance defeated. Prisoners freed. Everything conducted by the book, professional, disciplined, correct. But it isn't 32,000. And everyone knows it. The newspapers know it. The soldiers know it. The politicians know it. Montgomery knows it. April 20th, 1945. SJF main headquarters, Versailles. Eisenhower summons senior commanders for an operational review. The war is ending. Final phase coordination is required. Junction with Soviet forces is imminent. Political boundaries must be respected. Occupation zones prepared. Montgomery attends. Patton attends. Bradley attends. British and American officers fill the room. According to Bradley's memoir, Patton enters radiating satisfaction. He knows what he's done. He knows everyone else knows. He isn't apologetic. He isn't defensive. He's content. Montgomery's face is stone, professional, unreadable. The meeting covers logistics, supply, occupation planning, coordination with Soviet forces, redeployment to the Pacific, administrative details of Germany's surrender. And then, inevitably, Eisenhower turns to Third Army's operations, the subject hanging over the room since the meeting began. Before Eisenhower can speak, Montgomery does. General Patton, he says formally, precisely, your Army's advance has been remarkable. The numbers are extraordinary. However, it has also created significant complications. Diplomatic complications with our Soviet allies, logistical complications within the theater supply system, command and control complications for SHEF. Patton meets his gaze without blinking. It also freed 32,000 Allied prisoners of war, he replies calmly, including 4,000 British soldiers. I assume that's not considered a complication. Field Marshal. The room falls silent. Everyone knows exactly how this history will be remembered. Between these two men, the history was long and bitter. Sicily, Market Garden, the race across France, 2 full years of tension and rivalry. Montgomery's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. Don't be flippant, General. The issue is adherence to operational plans. We cannot have individual commanders operating independently of theater-wide coordination. It creates chaos. Field Marshal, with respect, Patton replies, his voice steady but firm. While you were adhering to plans, my men were cutting locks off prisoner cages. While you were coordinating, my soldiers were loading starving men onto trucks. While you were following procedure, I was sending 4,000 British soldiers home to their families. I'll take that trade every single time. That's enough. Eisenhower's voice cuts through the room like a blade. The Supreme Commander turns to Patton, studying one of his most difficult subordinates. George, you drove everyone in this headquarters insane for 2 weeks. You ignored boundaries, exceeded your authority, operated beyond approved objectives, and made my life a living hell with both Churchill and Stalin. Do you understand that? Patton sits quietly now, his expression serious. Yes, sir. I understand. You also saved more lives in 15 days than any single operation since Normandy. Eisenhower says, pause and let it sink in. Your after-action report had better be exceptional, because I'll need it to justify this to Washington, London, and Moscow. He turns to Montgomery. Monty, George's methods are unorthodox. They're frustrating. They drive you mad. They drive me mad. They violate every principle of staff coordination we've tried to establish in this theater. But 32,000 men are alive and going home because he doesn't wait for perfect conditions, because he acts while others plan. Montgomery's face remains rigid. After a long pause, he speaks carefully. I do not dispute the results, Supreme Commander. The liberation numbers speak for themselves. I dispute the precedent. I dispute the message it sends about the chain of command. I dispute the implication that following orders is somehow less valuable than individual initiative. Noted, Eisenhower replies, and you're not wrong, but George isn't wrong either. Sometimes the mission changes faster than the orders. Sometimes you have to trust field commanders to see opportunities headquarters cannot. That's why we give them armies instead of checklists. The meeting moves on through logistics, administration, final phase planning. The tension never fully leaves the room. When it ends, Montgomery leaves without a word to Patton. Patton doesn't try to stop him. There's nothing left to say. The numbers have already spoken, but the story doesn't end there. That evening, officers gather at the club in Versailles, a rare moment of relaxation as the war's end finally comes into view. Guards drop slightly, conversations loosen. Among them is British journalist Alan Moorhead, who has covered the war from North Africa through Sicily, Normandy, Paris, and beyond. Respected and trusted, he notices Montgomery standing alone at the bar, drink in hand, staring into nothing. Moorhead approaches cautiously. "Field Marshal," he says, "may I ask for your comment on Third Army's liberation numbers for the historical record?" Montgomery looks at him for a long moment. Moorhead expects a refusal, a deflection to official statements. Instead, Montgomery takes a sip of his drink. When he speaks, his voice is quiet, almost resigned, the voice of a man arguing as much with himself as with anyone else. "You've made your point, Patton. You've certainly made your point." Moorhead writes it down. The line appears in his dispatches, picked up by other journalists, spreading through military circles, newspapers, and history itself. "You've made your point." 6 words, spoken softly over a drink, yet containing everything. The rivalry, the philosophical clash, the conflict between doctrine and results. Anyone who understands Bernard Montgomery knows it isn't an endorsement of Patton's methods. It is the closest Montgomery ever came to admitting that Patton's chaos, his disregard for boundaries, doctrine, and procedure, had achieved something Montgomery's careful planning could not. The rivalry burned from Sicily to Germany, personality clashes that nearly tore Allied command apart, strategic disagreements that forced Eisenhower to constantly referee, egos that became legend. They embodied fundamentally different views of war. Montgomery believed in methodical preparation, overwhelming force at the decisive point, set-piece battles where every variable was controlled, risk minimized, certainty maximized, victory achieved through planning and resources. Patton believed in speed, aggression, exploitation, hitting hard and moving fast, accepting risk as the price of opportunity, creating chaos for the enemy, winning through tempo and violence of action. For 2 years, these philosophies collided. Montgomery saw Patton as reckless and dangerous, a cowboy playing soldier. Patton saw Montgomery as timid, overcautious, more concerned with not losing than with winning. Eisenhower balanced them, used each according to his strengths, kept them focused on the mission instead of each other. And in April 1945, the results delivered a verdict. Montgomery's method worked. 12,000 Allied prisoners liberated through systematic operations, 12,000 lives saved, 12,000 families reunited. That matters. That is real and significant. But Patton's method saved 32,000. The difference isn't doctrine or philosophy. The difference is 32,000 versus 12,000. 20,000 human beings. 20,000 prisoners who might have died in the chaos of the Reich's collapse. 20,000 men who saw American tanks and knew they were going home. 20,000 lives. Not statistics. Not numbers on a chart. 20,000 individual people, each with a name, a family, a future that continued because in April 1945, George Patton decided speed mattered more than orders. You've made your point. What Montgomery was really saying was this: I understand now. I don't like it. I don't approve of your methods. I think you're reckless, undisciplined, and a danger to proper military structure. But I understand it your way, infuriating as it is, dangerous as it is, impossible as it should be, saves more lives. You proved it with 32,000 pieces of evidence. You've made your point. I still think you're wrong, but you've made your point. Montgomery never said that publicly. He never praised Patton's April operations in official statements. He never endorsed the methods. In his 1958 memoirs, published 13 years after the war, Montgomery wrote, Patton's methods in April 1945 were unorthodox and created operational difficulties for theater command. However, the liberation of prisoners was achieved with remarkable speed. One cannot argue with results of that magnitude, even if one questions the methods employed to achieve them. That was as close as Bernard Montgomery ever came to admitting George Patton was right. Carefully qualified, hedged with concerns about precedent. But that single sentence spoken quietly to a journalist over a drink in an officers' club on April 20th, 1945 said everything that needed to be said. You've made your point. So what happened afterward? What were the consequences of that extraordinary 2-week period? Third Army's final count stood at 32,000 Allied prisoners liberated in April 1945, along with the liberation of Buchenwald, one of the most infamous concentration camps in the Nazi system. Buchenwald held political prisoners, resistance fighters, Jews, Soviet prisoners of war, and others targeted by Nazi ideology. When American forces arrived on April 11th, they found thousands barely alive. Patton ordered every unit in the area to tour the camp. He wanted his soldiers to see exactly what they were fighting against. Then came Flossenburg, liberated on April 23rd. Then dozens of sub-camps and labor camps scattered across central Germany. Then forced march columns intercepted on roads as the Nazis tried desperately to move prisoners away from advancing Allied forces. In the final month of the war, Third Army advanced roughly 240 miles, crossed 6 major rivers under combat conditions, liberated hundreds of towns and cities, destroyed or bypassed collapsing Wehrmacht resistance. The logistics bordered on impossible. Fuel consumption exceeded all projections. Maintenance requirements should have slowed the advance to a crawl. Staff calculations said the combination of combat operations and humanitarian missions should have reduced tempo by at least 30%. Instead, Patton's logistics officers improvised emergency resupply, forward dumps, captured German fuel, relentless problem solving. By comparison, British 21st Army Group liberated approximately 12,000 prisoners during the same period, over a broader area, overcoming heavy resistance at Bremen and Hamburg, securing major cities through deliberate combined arms operations. Both saved lives. Both helped end the war. But the numbers spoke for themselves. 32,000 versus 12,000, with roughly equal force strength and comparable opportunities. The difference wasn't resources. It was philosophy. It was tempo. It was Patton. The diplomatic consequences Eisenhower feared never fully materialized. Stalin was irritated by how aggressively American forces approached the demarcation line, but the war was ending and the alliance held. The boundaries were ultimately respected. Churchill, privately, was delighted that British prisoners had been freed so quickly. He sent a personal message to Eisenhower asking that his appreciation be conveyed to Patton, noting that while the methods were unorthodox, the results spoke eloquently. Even Churchill, long a supporter of Montgomery, couldn't argue with 32,000 lives saved. The German Reich collapsed on May 7, 1945. Admiral Karl Donitz authorized unconditional surrender. Germany ceased to exist as a military power. The war in Europe ended. George Patton never apologized for April 1945. Why would he? 32,000 lives were his justification, his defense, his answer to every criticism. When staff officers raised concerns about logistics, he pointed to the liberation numbers. When headquarters questioned his authority, he pointed to the freed prisoners. When Montgomery criticized his methods, he pointed to 4,000 British soldiers going home. 32,000 lives. That was the answer to everything. Montgomery never publicly praised Patton's April operations, but after April 20th, he never publicly criticized them either. The numbers made criticism impossible. How do you condemn a man for saving too many lives too quickly? In his post-war memoir Crusade in Europe, published in 1948, Eisenhower wrote of Patton. His bold, audacious operations in the final months of the war saved countless lives and materially shortened the conflict. His methods were unorthodox. His personality was difficult. His disregard for boundaries created diplomatic complications. But his results were undeniable. History will judge him not by the orders he ignored, but by the lives he saved. That is high praise from a supreme commander who spent 2 years managing Patton and defending him to political leaders. And here is what often gets lost amid strategy, rivalry, command disputes, and diplomacy. Of the 32,000 prisoners Third Army liberated, more than 4,000 were British Commonwealth soldiers. Many had been prisoners since Dunkirk in 1940. 5 years in captivity. 5 years of wondering if they would ever go home. 5 years of watching friends die from disease, starvation, and brutality. 5 years of hoping someone would come. When American tanks rolled into those camps and intercepted those forced march columns, when soldiers jumped down cutlocks and shouted, "You're free!" those British prisoners didn't care about doctrine or operational boundaries. They didn't care that Patton had exceeded his authority. They didn't care about the argument between Montgomery and Patton. They cared that the Americans came fast, that they didn't wait, that speed mattered more than procedure, that the tanks kept coming. Camp after camp, day after day, until everyone was found. When those soldiers were repatriated to Britain, when they told their stories to families, journalists, and later historians, they talked about the Americans who liberated them. They talked about Third Army. They talked about how fast it moved, how it seemed to appear out of nowhere, how one day there were guards, fences, and death, and the next day there were American tanks, freedom, and life. And many of those soldiers said the same thing. They came for us. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't wait for coordination. They just came, and they saved us. That was George Patton's legacy in April 1945. Not the rivalry with Montgomery, not the diplomatic headaches, not the command disputes, not the headlines, but 32,000 men who went home because one general decided that saving lives mattered more than following orders. Bernard Montgomery eventually understood that, reluctantly, in a quiet moment with a drink in his hand, speaking to a journalist he trusted, when he acknowledged it with 6 simple words: "You've made your point." Decades later, military historians still debate Patton's methods. Was he a genius who understood operational tempo better than anyone else? Was he reckless and simply lucky? Was he both? The arguments continue in staff colleges and war colleges around the world. They teach Montgomery's careful planning. They teach Patton's aggressive exploitation. They teach both as valid, context-dependent, mission-specific approaches. But in April 1945 in central Germany, with camps full of dying prisoners, the Reich collapsing into chaos, and the war entering its final days, there was only one approach that saved the maximum number of lives in the minimum amount of time. And Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, architect at El Alamein, architect of Market Garden, master of set-piece battles, guardian of procedure and doctrine, admitted it. You've made your point. Patton didn't win the rivalry. Montgomery didn't either. The rivalry was never the point. It mattered only to their egos and to the men forced to manage them. The point was that 32,000 men went home. The point was that families were reunited. The point was that prisoners who believed they would die in German camps instead lived to see peace. That was the point. That was always the point. And decades later, the children and grandchildren of those men grew up, lived full lives, built families, careers, experienced joy and loss and everything in between. They existed because in April 1945, George Patton didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for perfect coordination. He didn't wait for ideal conditions. He moved fast, aggressively, relentlessly, until everyone was free. Bernard Montgomery understood that in his own way, in his own time, with his own reluctant admission, "You've made your point." 6 words, spoken quietly over a drink to a journalist on April 20th, 1945. 6 words that ended the debate, acknowledged the truth, and admitted, however unwillingly, that sometimes chaos saves more lives than order, sometimes speed matters more than doctrine, sometimes results matter more than procedure, and sometimes one difficult, aggressive, seemingly impossible general saves 32,000 lives. And sometimes that is all that matters. If this story revealed something about World War II you never knew before, something about leadership, courage, and the cost of saving lives, do me a favor. Subscribe to WW2 Elite. Hit the like button. Leave a comment telling me which general, which battle, which decision, which moment you want to hear about next when one person changed everything. We're building a community that refuses to let these stories fade into footnotes and statistics. These were real people Real decisions, real consequences, and their stories deserve to be told. I'll see you in the next one.